up? Jack here with DevSlopes.com from the DevSlopes Southern Command Center. Welcome back to our API course. Making good progress here. Before we begin with this lesson, I want to show you something real fast. So just to check things out, I pulled up a terminal and I went ahead and ran npm run dev just to see. And now this is just an example of some troubleshooting you can do. But when I ran it, it immediately crashed. And you can see here, and I could tell exactly where this was at. This is in our create server call here. If you look, I've got a colon here. So we need to change that to a dot and save it. And then it immediately crashed again. And it says right here, can't find module ... /config. So that probably tells me, I know I've got a config folder here. That probably tells me that I'm on the wrong level here. So if you look down through here, we can see right here, this line right here, it says db.js. So that was my hint that my DB was in fact wrong. And if you look here, DB is on the same level as index. So instead of ... /config, it should just be one dot. So if we change that and save it, it shows we're now running started on port 3005. And if I pull up my terminal over here, this is where I've got Mongo running. You can see here I've got one connection accepted from 127.0.0.1, which is this machine. It's got one connection now open. So that means that our DB call to connect to the database is working. If I stop this, you can see here it ended the connection and now there's 0 connections open. But if I fire it back up, you can see here connection accepted from 127.0.0.1. So we know that our DB code is working and we're actually making a connection to our database. So that's just a little thing I wanted to point out to you there. Let's go ahead and keep building out our API. So to start with, let's take a look at our index.js file here. And we pretty much got everything set up the way we need to be except for our middleware. And we need to add something. We've imported body parser here, but we haven't added it in. So for our middleware, we need to add in our body parser so that we can parse JSON in a request. So here we're going to take our app object and say .use, and then we're going to pass in body parser .json. Now we need to pass in an option here, and we'll say limit : and then we're going to say config.bodyLimit. And then we're going to end this off with a semicolon. Now what this option is it's going to limit the size of data that can be passed in. We don't want to allow just any size because shoot, someone could send a 2 terabyte file or something. We want to keep the limit reasonable here. So this config.bodyLimit, we need to set that up in our config file. So if we come back to our config, we can just put a comma here, and then we can just say body limit, and then we'll make it something like 100 kilobytes. And we don't need a semicolon there. That's 100K for a JSON. JSON info is, or JSON data isn't bad. All right, let's move back over to our index file and just see if we've got anything else. We got our parser, we've got our route specified, servers start. I think we're good on that. And we're good on our database file. We're making the connection there. We've got the callback in there. For our routes, let's go ahead and take a look at that now. So we're using the internal middleware here, if there is any. And then we can specify our routes right here. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to take our router object, which is this express right here, this instance of express, and we're going to say .use, and then we're going to say /restaurant. And then we're going to say restaurant, and with destructuring, we're going to specify config and DB here. Now this restaurant hasn't been added yet. This is going to be a controller that's going to control this is going to be a controller, kind of like if you think about a view controller in Swift, how it controls all the views and everything. Well, this is going to control our restaurant part of the API here. So up at the top, we need to import restaurant from, and we're going to specify // controller, and this time we're going to specify restaurant, because we're not going to use an index file there because we might have multiple controllers, so we want to split those out in individual files. So obviously now that we've done that, we need to create this folder in this file. So if we come over here to source and do new folder, so we added a new folder called controller, and we need a new file in there, and it needs to just be called restaurant.js. So let's go back and save our route file. So under controller here, we've got restaurant.js. So in it, we need to import Mongoose. We need to import, we're going to use destructuring here to grab router from Express. We need to import restaurant with a capital R notice from /model/restaurant. And we haven't created that yet, obviously. We're going to create that here in just a minute. And we should be good there. All right. So we're going to export default here. We're going to throw in our config and DB and use the fat arrow function. And then here we're going to say let API equal router. Okay, and then now for our v1/restaurant/add, this is going to be our first route right here. Routes is throwing it over to this controller, and we're going to specify this route right here, which is v1/restaurant/add. And we're going to start off with adding data because we don't have anything in the database yet. So we're going to make a few calls to the database to add some data, and then in the next lesson we'll get to how we retrieve it. And basically in a REST API you've got several operations. It's called CRUD, create, read, update, and delete. And we use different HTTP verbs depending on what we're trying to do. We'll use post, put, get, and delete in order to handle those CRUD operations. So for this first route in this controller is going to be v1/restaurant/add. And I might have talked about it before, I can't remember. But I always put v1 in here in my APIs because this is version 1. There may come a time when I need a version 2 where I need to add some things, but I don't want to break all the functionality with v1. So when you specify a versioning like this, it's easy to add in v2 and leave v1 alone. So we've got that, and to create this route, we just need to say API, and it's going to be a post method. So we say .post, and then we add our URL here, which is /add. So index gets us to routes, which is the V1 part. Routes adds on the /restaurant and gets us to here. And then in this call right here, we're adding this part onto the URL. So then in here, we've got a function, and we're going to use a fat arrow function. We've got a response and a request. Okay, and then here we're going to say let new rest or new restaurant equal new restaurant. It's got to be a capital R. So right there, we just created a new restaurant. And restaurant is going to be a Mongoose model. We'll see that here in just a minute. But we created a new instance of that. Then we can say new rest.name, because that's the only property we're going to have right now. We're going to add in complexity later, but just to begin with, we're going to add in just a simple name property, get some data in there, see how to interact with it, and then we'll move on and make things a little more complicated. So we'll just say new rest.name equals request.body.name. So what we've done is we've created a new object here, a new restaurant, and we've assigned the name of that restaurant the value of the request.body.name, which is what we're getting back from, or what we're getting from the client. So we can skip down a couple of blocks. Now we can say new rest.save, and here we can use a fat arrow function again. And this error object here, if we get it back, that means there was an error. So we'll just say if error, and we'll just say response.send and pass that object in, and that'll send it back to the client. Otherwise, we're going to do res.json, and we're going to send back a message that says restaurant saved successfully. All right. We need a semicolon there, a semicolon there. And then down here, since we create our API here, we need to return that. So we'll save that. So this is pretty simple, pretty straightforward. We're just creating a post here. We're grabbing our response and request, creating a new restaurant, setting the name equal to the request body.name, and then we're just using this .save method here, which is a Mongoose method, and that will save it to the database. This is how Mongoose makes it very simple to work with Mongo from a REST API, or with Node in general. So that's all we need here. Now we need to go create our model. And so we're going to need a models folder. And then inside model, we need to create a restaurant. So this is our restaurant file here inside of our model. So we need to import Mongoose from Mongoose. And then we'll say let schema equals mongoose.schema. A Mongoose schema is kind of like the blueprint for the data model, or it's the data model that you're going to use. So you lay out the types and everything that you need, and that's how Mongoose operates. So we'll just say let restaurant schema equal new schema. And all we're going to do in this restaurant schema is we're just going to have the one simple property, and that's name, and it's going to be a string. Now we could go ahead and list a bunch of other properties here if we wanted to. And we will be later on. But for now, we're keeping it simple. We can also do things in these schemas like have validations to specify if it's required or not, the length. You can trim spaces. You can do a lot of different things. And we'll take a look at that later. But all we've got left at this point is just to do module.exports equals mongoose.model. And then here we specify our model name. And then a comma, and then we specify our restaurant schema. And that's it. So we can save that. Now, if everything went well, which it rarely does, well, you see right here, I left dev running. We've got an issue right here. So in our restaurant file, no. Oh, it's in our controller. So if we go here, you can see I put form instead of from. Let me save that. And now it shows we're running on 3005. So let's just pull up RoboMongo here. We talked about it, and I'm going to connect to my local Mongo database running here. And let's see, we don't have the database that I laid out, which was restaurant-API. So the database hasn't been created yet. So let's go ahead and pull up Postman. Now this is a live test. You know how things go on live tests. There's probably a typo somewhere, but we'll see. So this is going to be a post call. And we're going to localhost port 3005. And the URL was v1/restaurant/add. And then we can click on body and do raw. And in this drop down, pull it down and choose JSON. Now when we do that, it's going to add in this content type header here. Okay, so in the body, we'll just put our curly braces. And then here we can just put name, colon, and then Fluffy Knuckles. Have no idea. Fluffy Knuckles Barbecue, how about that? That's not actually a place that I know of. I don't think I would eat there either, but anyway. So, if we've got everything working right, when I hit send, we should get a response back, and that should be written to the database. And like I said, this is a live test here, so we'll see how it goes. Okay, so we've got an error. Cannot read property name of undefined, and I've got a sneaking suspicion of what's going on here. Okay, so I went away there for just a minute, and I had to find the source of this bug. And I guess it's when you get in a hurry, sometimes you just do stupid things. But if you look at our model or our controller here in our post call, I've got this as response and request. Well, that's backwards. It should be request and response. So let me save that. Okay. NodeMon fired everything back up again. So now let's do our second live test and just see what happens. So we've got our same post request here. I want to hit send. And now we get message restaurant saved successfully. So we're getting back a 200, which means okay. We're getting back the message we're expecting. Now let's take a look at RoboMongo and refresh. And you see here now I do in fact have the restaurant API database in here. And if I go to collections and double click restaurants collection, you see here we got Fluffy Knuckles Barbecue. And it's got this object ID that it created. So other than that one little stupid mistake I made, everything seems to be going to plan. And so we'll jump on over to the next video and we'll look at actually getting data back. So join me in the next video and we'll keep rolling.